personality traits like perfectionism, being a people pleaser, and being sensitive and anxious and indecisive are so common among those with chronic pain and TMS. Do these personality traits contribute to the pain, make the pain worse, or both, and why? So this is a million-dollar question. And of course, I can't answer it definitively, but I can do an exploration we can all do an exploration together. So first of all, these traits were taken from the Mind Body Prescription by John Sarno, which if you want a reference to it, on the lower left side of this screen, there's a tmswiki.org, and they talk about TMS personality traits. So if you want just sort of a review of these, it's a great resource, period, but it's also explains in a lot more detail how these were originally discussed by Sarno. And the words I use here are not the words he used. For example, Black and White Thinking, he used the word legalism, which was for him a sort of a simple way to understand a pattern of what he was seeing in patients. So the first thing to say before we go into this is that how these were identified was based on clinical observation of Sarno and people he worked with, of patterns that seemed to be very common among the people that were coming to him with pain. So there's a lot of selection bias here, meaning that the people who were naturally attracted to Sarno's work tended to be people, for whatever reason, with emotional, I think they're pretty normal, but these emotional patterns that were related to pain. So these were first identified through clinical observation rather than, through objective research, which doesn't mean that they're less valid. It just means that these were identified by Sarno and other people who were really closely paying attention to what their patients were expressing to them. And to organize this, I made them into circles, colored circles. And I have anxiety as a big one, because anxiety sort of reaches into all of these things, but we're going to play around with this in a moment. So the first thing I want to say, if any of these words, I guess, reflects your personal experience, and you feel a judgment come up in yourself, to take a pause and to remember that patterns always have reasons. Personality patterns always have reasons. And so I'm going to walk you through this in two ways. The first pattern is, how does it protect you? Because all of these patterns, even though they are discussed in ways that are sort of judgmental, and often we think about them in judgmental ways whenever we're, like, oh, I'm such a perfectionist, it's like a curse, things like that. These were patterns that we specifically developed long ago to protect ourselves. So let's look at what each of these does to protect. Perfectionism helps, and one way to think about this is, because these are often long-standing patterns, I often think of it as a child. Why would perfectionism help a child? It'd help a child avoid criticism, punishment, and just enhance feelings of confidence. Like, I'm lovable because I can be perfect according to whoever's definition of perfect I'm looking at. Maybe it's my parents, maybe it's my friends, or a romantic partner. People pleasing also protects us, because others will treat me better. It won't trigger anger responses or aggression in them. So people pleasing is often something that protected us from aggression from other people. So it's a way to soothe other people's emotions to where they won't lash out at you. Low self-esteem is also protective, because whenever you're small and you stay small, you avoid having needs, and you can become more acceptable by others. So for instance, if you had a parent who didn't give you enough room to be you learned that staying small and having very few personal needs helped you avoid conflicts, because whenever you expressed needs, it was punished. And I'm talking in very dramatic terms here, but just to sort of put the points across. So there was a protective reason underlying low self-esteem. reason why it's there. Black and white thinking also have protective reasons, because whenever you understand the rules of your parent or your husband or wife, these really stringent rules, if you understand what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, you can follow what's acceptable and avoid being punished or inciting anger. It also reduces feelings of uncertainty in yourself because you're following the rules, you're doing the right thing, which increases your feelings of control. A lot of black and white thinking we inherited from our parents as conditional statements of what it means, what we need to believe in order to be approved or lovable by someone else. So all of these have really deep roots. Emotional suppression has a really important protective function because it helps you avoid feeling all these intense, negative, sticky emotions. And it helps sort of, if you aren't aware of your needs and you aren't aware of your pain, you then don't have to face them. And facing them is work. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of courage. And we're all on that journey together here. But so emotional suppression also plays a protective role. High emotional reactivity, which Sarno called, I believe, hostile aggressive personality, is whenever just, you have a very low threshold for stress and you lash out at people. How does this protect you? How does it protect you to lash out at people? Well, it's a safe, small expression of a lot of built up anger. So for instance, snapping or biting back at someone like a friend or a loved one is a very safe way to express anger. And if you have a lot of anger built up in yourself, it's kind of a release valve. And one of the deeper levels of higher emotional reactivity, which is what I think it is, it's whenever it's hard to accept something in ourselves, we tend to project it onto other people. For instance, if I don't feel safe, I blame you for making me feel unsafe. You're doing something that's making me feel this way. So there's, in that situation, you transfer the responsibility of someone else. You made me feel this way rather than these are my emotions that I own. And then there's a pattern of dependency where the protective function is having some feeling, if you have had a childhood experience or a marriage or friendships where your emotional needs were not being met in a way that made you feel safe, being dependent on someone creates that feeling of safety. And it's almost like an illusion of safety. And it's just sort of a safe space where, as long as I, for instance, in dependency, having other people make decisions for you, or saying, no, I really don't care what we do, whatever you want to do. It's sort of, there is no room for your needs to be expressed. So you let other people's needs guide your actions and your decisions. And also dependency, because you don't take risks and take on challenges, reduces novelty, which can be kind of scary. And it reduces the likelihood of change, which can feel threatening. So the reason why I go into all of this detail here is to explain that these features that someone might list as, this is a fault, this is something about me that isn't perfect, these all have reasons for being there. And, maybe in each of us, different combinations of these are expressed, but underlying all of them is a base of anxiety. Another way of looking at this is looking at the underlying emotional needs, in that if you're a perfectionist, what is the need that's driving the behavior? And looking at it in this way also is a compassionate way. For instance, a perfectionist, what they've internalized is, what do I need to do to be lovable and worthy right now? I'm going to do that. I'm going to be perfect so I can be lovable and worthy. And if you notice here, lovable, worthy, all of these things are in cognitive behavioral therapy, these are core beliefs. These have to do with core beliefs about what you need to do in order to be worthy, valuable, worthy of love. So these are very deep levels of emotional needs. People pleasing, the underlying emotional need there, the underlying idea is, if I meet your needs, then I'll be lovable. Low self-esteem is an expression of somehow I'm incomplete, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy. There's some level where you feel that's true. Black and white thinking, what's at the core of that? It's the idea, I'll be punished if I'm wrong, if I do something in the black area. And if I make mistakes, I'm going to be punished. Emotional suppression, the underlying need is the desire to express emotions, but the feeling that it's not safe to do that. Either it feels unsafe in your body, or perhaps you were raised in a family environment where there was no room given for your emotions. So emotions just feel dangerous and overwhelming, and in the past, you get punished whenever you have emotions. And so they build up and they become really strong, which becomes really physically uncomfortable. So you want to suppress even more. And then high emotional reactivity. The underlying idea there is, I feel bad, it must be your fault. So the idea is, you made me feel this way, rather than just saying like, right now I feel this way in my body. So it's sort of like a blame. There's a bit of blame there. And that comes from patterns that we learned. And the pattern underneath that is, often we get it from our parents, and they got it from their parents. So it's no one's fault. But the pattern there is, you disagree with me, therefore you're against me. If you don't see it how I see it, you're against me. And there are various reactions. So that inspires anger. And then, of course, dependency, the underlying need is, I want someone to take care of me. I want to feel secure. And there's nothing wrong with that. And also, change feels scary. And I don't feel like I have control over change. So I don't want change to happen. I don't want new things to come into my life. So you can see here on multiple levels, all of these traits have a reason for being there. They are reactions from different experiences that we've had in our lives. So let's look at, and to one of the questions that someone had asked that is indirectly answered here is, I didn't have any childhood trauma or anything big happening to me. Why do I have pain? I don't have trauma that leads to pain. Why do I have pain? One of the patterns could be these personality traits. And it's not wrong to have these personality traits. It means that early in life, or in major relationships that were important to us, we learned that we had to be a certain way to be lovable. And the anxiety, the weight of trying to be that way and to be perfect and to meet someone else's needs and to mind read and to absorb other people's emotions and be really empathic, the weight of that is something that's carried by the nervous system. And this is one of Sarno's points here, that the weight of carrying this, it's a load on the nervous system that can manifest as pain. So what I have here is this isn't the truth. This is my interpretation, first of all. I think anxiety is sort of the looping. It sort of goes through all of these things, but also let's imagine how this started. In an early relationship, or in a dominant romantic relationship, or an important life relationship, because we typically learn these things from other people. There was a model about what we needed to do to be lovable, and that is sort of formally codified in black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is, it's bad if I do this. People are either good or bad, and this is what good people do, this is what bad people do. You're ungrateful or you're grateful. So black and white thinking can manifest in a lot of ways, but what this essentially is rules. These were rules about what types of behaviors were acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. If you do the acceptable behavior, the white thinking, then you keep in the clear, you avoid punishment. If by having needs and having emotions, you fall into someone else's categorization of black thinking, then you get punished and you get aggression and you get things that reinforce this anxiety loop. This manifests as different patterns and ways that people act in the world. One of those ways could be perfectionism or people pleasing, which often happen together, or dependency. So these, relying on others and not wanting a lot of change. These are ways of not rocking the boat, putting other people's needs before our own, and for trying to perfectly meet the criteria of what white is, whatever that is, whatever our family of origin defined as acceptable behavior, to the point where it becomes a preoccupation. I'm going to be so perfect that I don't inspire any anger. No one's going to punish me. No one's going to get mad at me. I won't have any needs. So I won't, I won't experience any of the stuff that I've experienced before. So these are the actions. What that leads to in the body are two things. First, it leads to emotional suppression. And whenever that suppression can no longer be tolerated, so this is essentially holding the emotions in the nervous system, in the body for years. Whenever that can no longer be sustained, then it explodes with the high emotional reactivity, where you explode onto other people. So it's like this balancing game of trying to hold all these emotions, these heavy emotions in that you can't express because you're trying to follow these perfect rules. And whenever you just can't hold it anymore, you just explode, you overreact, you lash out in an aggressive or hostile way to people that you love. And that leads you to then feel low self-esteem because, oh my gosh, I've tried to be perfect. I've done everything I possibly could, and my body just couldn't handle it because I'm suppressing all of my emotions and just exploded everywhere. And then this is where you make a judgment on yourself at the end with low self-esteem, which reinforces the anxiety. So this is my best understanding of how all of these classic features that are related to the TMS personality come to be. And you can see that there's nothing wrong here. Trying at each of these stages, this is trying to do the best with what you have. And a lot of times we develop these patterns whenever we were children or teenagers, where we didn't have the coping capacity to have a conversation with our parent or with a partner and say, whenever you say this, it makes me feel like this, and have them respond in a responsible way back rather than like lashing out. So for a lot of our lives, these are the best attempts to manage a lot of emotional trauma that we experience just by being raised in family environments that also inherited these patterns from their parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. So the other side of this is that often our parents inherited these patterns from their parents. They're repeating what they know, and they don't know another way. And so one of the parts of the work here is realizing, okay, this pattern can stop with me, and it requires feeling into the emotions. And the reason why, there's no magic answer why this could lead to pain in some people and not in others. For instance, in some people, this may be more likely to express as depression and anxiety without physical pain. Or it could be anxiety, depression, and physical pain. Or it could be chronic symptoms that aren't pain, or it could be a combination of all of these things. But in all of these cases, the anxiety is what is acting on your nervous system over years and decades. And what that means is it's creating a chronic stress response that isn't being alleviated. And usually it just increases. It's an energetic load on your nervous system. And so what this means is that long-term anxiety from just the exhaustion of having to keep up this cycle of trying to be perfect, trying to do the right thing, trying to have no needs, have no emotions, that this burden on your nervous system fuels sympathetic arousal, which is one of the key players that fuels the chronic pain experience. And on that note, the sympathetic arousal, whenever you look at how it occurs in the brain, through norepinephrine, is one of the key neurotransmitters that strengthens emotional learning. If there are any nerds listening to it, it's specifically the norepinephrine exposure in the basolateral amygdala that strengthens the intensity of an emotional memory, which then enhances its persistence over years and decades. So this is a cycle. And one of the first things is just to notice that it's a cycle. It had all of these personality traits had a reason for being there. They were protective. They were protecting us to the best of our ability at the time, but by holding on to them, they no longer are protective. They're actually adding to the strain on the nervous system. So in terms of how that could actually impact the nervous system and therefore pain, this hypothesis is most strongly supported by the science that exists right now. And I know that this has been sort of heavy. I want to remind everyone that anything that can be emotionally learned can be emotionally unlearned. There is no pattern in the nervous system that cannot be changed. And the biggest fuel for changing these patterns is new learning. It's breaking cycles, it's breaking habits, it's doing something different. It's whenever you feel you're in the moment and you naturally suppress the emotion, deciding, okay, this time I'm going to feel it. And doing that hundreds of times over the course of years. Because also whenever this burden is being slowly expressed by feeling emotions, it'll come out in little bursts. And we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail in one of the next sections, but all of your pain will not come out at once. All of your anger won't come out at once. All of the anxiety won't come out at once. Your nervous system is so intelligent. It'll just release as much as you can handle right now. And yeah, it might feel really intense, but your body knows exactly how much you can handle. And so it'll be little bursts of feeling the emotions. And the more you do that, the more that the weight of the subconscious on your nervous system, the less of that burden there'll be. So that was a bit of a heavier exploration there. Mary says, it seems like emotional suppression and high emotional reactivity are opposite. And that's absolutely true. There could be some people who do one more than the other, but also habitually suppressing emotions over the course of years and decades. It's almost like whenever there's high pressure gas in a container, and you just, the more every emotion you add to that tank, it increases the pressure. And then sometimes there won't be an opportunity to hold it in, and it sort of, there's a leak, and it comes out as anger or hostility, which leads to the high emotional reactivity. There could also be some people who, for instance, even though they do a lot of emotional suppression, they are more likely to rely on high emotional reactivity for whatever reason, or vice versa. So some people express all of these traits. Some people express different traits in different amounts. And it sort of depends on you and the people that you surround yourself with in terms of what is most acceptable. So that's a very great point, Mary. And I just want to reinforce that, like, all of these patterns that I'm describing, even if they've been with you for decades, they can still be, Jennifer says, call it the Hulk complex. Yes, like the, these can all be healed. And this step there, and actually we'll discuss one example of this with anger in a little bit, but these can all be healed just by feeling the emotions. In a sense, so much of healing is just giving yourself permission and space and time to feel emotions, which I know is scary. But one of the interesting things about it is that the scariness, it's, if you think about it, it's the fear of re-experiencing the memory. That's actually a little more accurate than fear of experiencing the emotion. It's a fear that there are memories that we have that are so hurtful or dangerous or scary that we don't want to pull them out. But it's always important to remember that it is a memory. Even if there's a deep abuse history, you're pulling out a memory. So that might also make it seem a little more approachable. It's not anger itself, and it'll never be the whole emotion, the whole storage, like all the anger that comes out at once. It'll be just as much as you can handle at that moment, given where your nervous system is at. And Mark asks, should you try and take the initiative in connecting with emotions, or just let your brain take the initiative? Just deal with what comes up. This is such a fantastic question. And I would say it depends on where you are. For example, if there's a certain intelligence with emotions that come up in the moment, in that it means that there's something about the situation that's reminding you of what caused that anger. And so whenever they just naturally come up, that's a really great time to deal with them. If you feel like your nervous system is on max and you can't handle more information, that would probably be a cue to hold back on delving into some of the deeper emotions intentionally, unless you create a space, like a time and space where you can really go into it. And the reason why I bring this up is because so many people that I interact with here, our nervous systems are fried from what has happened over the past 3 years and from whatever is happening in the outside world right now, and all the stuff that's coming up. So, even for all the people here who have pain, it's not just pain. There are like memory, like the amounts of times that I've been told in the past year, all these weird old memories are coming up and I don't know what to do and they freak me out. I wish I could tell you how many times I've heard that. It's happening to everyone, and I don't know what it is, but there are lots of people who are ready to heal. That's my interpretation of it. And so in that sense, Mark, whatever is ready to heal will come up to you and show itself to you in front of your face in the situation, in the moment. So you don't really need to search for it any further than that, unless you really feel motivated to do so. And if you feel like you need support or someone to hold space for you while you do that, that would probably be best with a therapist or with a trusted friend or someone that you feel can hold that space for you. So such a great question. And a lot of these childhood patterns are coming up. You know, one of the things that has helped me contextualize this the best is that any pattern that you have in yourself that you don't like has a reason for being there. It was protective at one point. It helped you at one point, and you sort of internalize that into your nervous system as like a lifelong coping pattern. And if it's coming up for you to be healed, it'll start to cause issues in your life. And that's just a sign. Whenever a conflict comes up, it's a sign that a pattern is coming up that's ready to be healed. I really feel like that's a true statement. And something also to remember is that these personality patterns, whenever they come up, they have a feeling in your body. They have a physical signature in your body. So with the memory that comes up, you may feel different pain or different sensations or different things in your body that are absolutely normal, that are just part of the emotional memory coming up, because emotional memory isn't just a story. Our emotional memories are part thoughts, part emotions, the physical sensations of safety, where we were in space, it's where we were looking. So that's one of the reasons why EMDR, uses eye tracking, because often, for instance, there might even be a part of space, if your eyes are looking in a certain direction, that's where that trauma memory is stored. So memories have all sorts of, they're multidimensional experiences that'll come up in your body. And it doesn't mean that things are breaking. It doesn't mean that there's a new crisis. It means there's something old coming up, a pattern that's been stored in your nervous system that just wants to be seen and experienced and kind of loved.